We've talked about it before, but that bridge going from the 1980s into the 1990s was huge for rock and roll music. Let's take the grunge movement out of it, because we could talk about that all day. There was so many other bands planting seeds beneath that 80s glam metal movement that was coming to an end, and the grunge movement that was about to take over the world. Well, one of those bands that was planting one of the biggest seeds of all time, completely underrated, is the band Jane's Addiction. What is going on, everybody? Welcome back, music lovers, especially my rock music lovers. Listen, if you're not subscribed to the channel, please do so right now. Absolutely hit that button. That'll help me and this channel grow. YouTube will put me out there to a more vast audience, and man, that's why I'm here. That would be great, but I cannot do it without the help from you, the audience. So please, if you're not subscribed, do that right now. Listen, years before Nevermind ever came out and just exploded and took over rock and roll music, Nirvana was a big part of what alternative rock would end up being from 1990 moving forward. No doubt they were so influential in the rock music scene. Nobody questions that. But there were so many other bands that were developing under the surface that people just weren't paying as much attention to. Bands like the Pixies, Sonic Youth, Faith No More, and Dinosaur Jr. All those bands were bringing on a beautiful kind of art of their own. It just wasn't being respected as much, and it was even less noticed when the grunge movement blew up to what it would inevitably become and completely captivate the culture that we were living in. Now, of course, there was another band that was doing the exact same thing, and nobody was realizing at the time how influential they were going to be, and that is Jane's Addiction. I mean, the guys originated in the same city that was absolutely ground zero for this glam hair metal movement, and I'm talking about Los Angeles, California. During the 80s, the bands that played all the clubs on the Sunset Strip were just completely captivating the world in their own right, and that era has to be respected, because whether you want to clown it or whether you want to acknowledge it and respect it for what it was such an amazing moment for rock music. But these guys from Jane's Addiction, they were slowly developing this beautiful style of art of their own, and it was completely going to be something that was hugely infectious into the rock and roll world. And people don't even realize it now, I don't think, unless you were there or you really take a second to stop and think about it. These guys were really going to bring together that beautiful art of rock music that we love and that pop culture, and just mesh them together with the style of music they were creating. And it just couldn't be denied the early years, and it definitely couldn't be denied on the album we're going to talk about today, which was their 1990 release, Ritual de la Habitual. Now, Eric Avery, Stephen Perkins, Dave Navarro, and Perry Farrell might not have been household names in the late 80s, but no doubt these guys were developing a hell of a fan base and completely taking over the Los Angeles rock music scene. It just wasn't going to explode as fast as maybe they were wanting or thought it would or hoping it would. But this band was poised and ready to define the next generation. And as they rolled into the 90s, they were absolutely going to do that. Jane's Addiction pretty much took over the underground world with the 1988 release of their debut album, Nothing Shocking. The psychedelic rock, funk style, metallic riffs that were being played on the songs, and Perry Farrell's just like a mystical being on stage. He's perfect for a frontman. Absolutely. If you had an ideal frontman that you wanted to choose from with all the characteristics, Perry Farrell is that guy, no doubt, and he's still that guy today. They captivated the world. Even before their 1988 release of their debut album, they had already released a 1987 live album. And the song that completely captivated everybody, especially in the Los Angeles area, where if you can get noticed there, you got a good chance of it spreading across the country, inevitably the world. And the song that really captivated, obviously, was Jane Says. Now, Nothing Shocking by Jane's Addiction is an amazing album. And not only that, for me personally, it brings back fond memories. I remember being the age of 3. My uncle loves Jane's Addiction. He loved them when he was younger. And he would always have me in his room telling me to do push-ups while he was working out as well. He always had Jane's Addiction blaring in the background. And those memories are so fond, and I absolutely love them. But one thing I firmly believe, and I am pretty sure any Jane's Addiction fan out there, you may not agree with me, the casual fan, it doesn't matter what kind of fan you are. I do believe that they saved some of their best material. Some of the songs they had written that were, in their opinion, probably the best. Well, they saved them for their sophomore album, which we all know is absolutely amazing. And that's what we're going to talk about today. Obviously, before Ritual would ever be released by Jane's Addiction, they had to record the album. Now, some of the horror stories coming out about the recording sessions for this album are just mind-blowing, especially the fact that we know this album is pretty much close to perfection when it comes to an alternative rock album. It's a thing of beauty. I mean, Dave Navarro and Perry Farrell were so caught up in their drug addiction at the time. There was times that Dave Navarro would just call and say he's not going to make it. There was times that Perry Farrell would show up 2 to 3 hours late. And you had guys like Stephen Perkins and Eric Avery just sitting in the studio waiting. There was times Eric Avery would not record his parts on songs because of what he described as Perry Farrell's dictator-like persona. He was just always wanting to tell the guys, this is what we're going to do, this is how you're going to do it. And that'll wear on anybody. It's your job if you got somebody that's asserting that type of behavior. And it's going to drive you crazy at some point. And if you got guys like myself, I got a team that works for me. When guys call in or show up late, it hurts the team. In this case, it would hurt the band, which was their team. And man, so much crap just to record this album. Like I said, it's amazing the work of art that came from all that chaos. So it was August 21st of 1990 when Jane's Addiction would release Ritual, and it was received amazingly by fans and critics alike. Everybody loved this album. There was no doubt. Spin Magazine even came out and said that this album just makes you realize how few bands there were out there that were trying to actually create good music, inspirational music. That says a lot right there. There was no doubt. I mean, these guys did amazing. This album has sold well over 2 million copies since it came out. I mean, it's been multi-platinum certified. I mean, it topped the Billboard charts at 19. It topped the UK Top 40 charts. I mean, the album, so amazing. Such amazing songs came off this album. Songs like No One Leaving, Stop, Obvious, Been Caught Stealing, of course, Classic Girl, 3 Days. All songs that tell you amazing stories and really dive deep into the mind of Perry Farrell and the guys with some brilliant lyrics. No doubt this album is one of the most classic albums of the 90s. And this started that new generation of rock music, and it did it absolutely beautifully. Jane's Addiction would tour for this album on the very first Lollapalooza tour, which was conceived by Perry Farrell himself. He came up with the idea after seeing some amazing festivals over in Europe, and it was absolutely the best thing that they could possibly do. I mean, this Lollapalooza festival, which has been killed and revived so many times, it absolutely boosted the profile of alternative rock music here in the States. I mean, it definitely did what I'm sure Perry Farrell had the intention of it doing. I mean, the thing was, these guys did this tour. So many other great bands, Rollins Band, Nine Inch Nails, they were amazing bands on this tour. And the problem was, obviously, all those issues and fractures that were created during the recording sessions of Ritual just resurfaced on the tour. Because, I mean, God, the tension's got to be high when you're touring around like that and you're constantly together every day. It takes a lot of work. It's like any relationship. But it was just hard to cover up those obvious problems. Navarro, who was newly sober and off of drugs. I mean, you had Avery, who was already clean, and it just didn't work because Perry Farrell was just continuing to indulge in his habits. So it was already going to be hard. This was meant to be, this first Lollapalooza was meant to be the band's farewell tour. And obviously, after some of their last stops on the tour, late 1991, the band would inevitably break up. Really quick, I gotta tell you a story that has to also help you realize how amazing this album was. I got a guy that works for me. This he's about 12 years older than me, so he got to live through as a young child that 80s glam metal movement, and he said he's very fond of it. Some amazing bands, Motley Crue being one of his favorites from that time. But he says he remembers that change in sound for rock music rolling into the 90s, and he's very much so a big fan of bands like Nirvana, Alice in Chains, Jane's Addiction, the Pixies, Sonic Youth, all those bands. He can sit there and talk to me for hours about them. Well, we had a conversation about Ritual the other day, and he was dating a girl when this came out, and she had the cassette tape. He said she got it stuck in the tape player in her car, so she could replay it as much as she wanted. But the album was such an amazing piece of work and a beautiful piece of art that she never bothered turning on the radio to listen to the radio. She never bothered trying to get it fixed to get the thing out. She could listen to it. He said she did until the day she sold that car. She would listen to it replay over and over and over again, because there was never a time where it would get old, and there was never a time that those songs weren't absolutely amazing. I thought that was a perfect way to describe how awesome this album is. There's no doubt in the world that Ritual is the pinnacle for Jane's Addiction. It's their best album, in my opinion. Now, I know that's not a universal opinion, especially some hardcore Jane's Addiction fans out there, like my uncle, who doesn't consider this their best album. But for me, it is. I mean, there's amazing songs from start to finish, and these guys have been rewarded for that, and it still gets talked about to this day. It has got to be one of the greatest albums to come out of the 90s, and we know there was some amazing albums in that decade for rock music. But Jane's Addiction, I think they're absolutely underrated as far as what their impact was on alternative rock moving forward. The style, the absolute not giving a shit what people think and trying to fit into the mainstream. They were going to do it their way, and they did it, and they were rewarded for it. And to this day, you listen to Perry Farrell talk, you listen to Dave Navarro talk, or any of the other guys, they will tell you how beautiful those moments were, how awesome the impact of that album was on them. Even though they always have that black hole just looming in the corner of the issues that were going on with them. Like anything in life, time heals. You know the bad memories will always be there, but you got to get over them and you got to move on. Because those friendships that they made, the time that they bonded together, those guys are like family. And they created some of the most beautiful music of a decade. So, again, you know they're going to move on and they're going to always have fond memories. And for us, we got one of the greatest albums to ever be released by an alternative rock band. And in my opinion, I'll say it, one of the most underrated bands of the decade as far as the 90s. Beautiful. But again, I got to know your opinion. Please drop in the comment section. What do you think of Jane's Addiction? What do you think of this awesome album that came out in 1990? I got to know. But until next time, go out there and take care of your friends, your family. Do something amazing. Do something less conservative, and it doesn't always have to be to please everybody. Because sometimes when you do it for yourself, what feels right, it turns out to be the best thing you could ever do. So again, till next time, take care of yourself. I'm out.